I remember to turn my mic on now. It's good to see everyone out this morning. This year we've been following a theme of loving the Lord our God with all of our souls, all of our hearts, all of our minds, all of our strength, and also studying the second command. Jesus said, the second is like it. The second is like it. Have you ever wondered how the second command to love your neighbor as yourself is like loving God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your mind, and all of your strength? I think it's worth a question. I think that's a good question to ask. Okay, love, there's love in both. As we love God with all of our beings, our priorities are going to line up accordingly. So there's more to it than a feeling, for sure. There's lots of feeling in it, but there's more to it than that as well. Matter of fact, it affects every aspect of our lives. What is it that loving our neighbor as ourselves requires? How is it that loving our neighbors as ourselves will affect every aspect of our life and, in fact, change who we are? John 14:23, Jesus says, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. So, in addition to the Father and the Son coming and making their home inside of our hearts, where they're with us through our lives, which is an amazing place I want to be in, it says that we then will naturally, if we care about them, if we love them, we will obey. That's our part back to them. So, loving the Lord then requires obedience. And I want to pair that with Philippians chapter 2. He speaks also of the way that the Philippian Christians had obeyed and commends them for that. And he says they've obeyed and that they should obey not only in his presence, but much more when he's not there with them. And then he instructs them, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. So the idea with work out your own salvation is figure it out. It doesn't say work your own salvation. He says work out your own salvation. There's a difference, right? So figure it out, pursue it, work toward it. And then in verse 13 he says, for it is God who works in you, both to will and to do for his good pleasure. Well, now that's an interesting piece of information. He says God is doing something in your life. God has things that he is accomplishing in you. Yes, he's helping you to come to a new place, to grow, to mature. And he's also got things that he wants you to help others with. You're going to affect other people. God is working in you. Is that, wow, what emotion, what's the first emotion that comes to your life, or your mind, your mind? It's going to be, the first one's going to be different for everyone. There are so many. It's an honor. It's a little scary that God would be doing something through me to others. It's amazing. It's exciting. Does beg a question, doesn't it? What is he doing through me? What is it that he wants me, what is the next step for me? What does he want me to do? How does he want me to grow? How does he want me to affect other people's life? What is it that I am to will and to do to come along and want the same thing he wants, to make my will the same as his, and to do for his good pleasure? I think that's an excellent question. And I think that we can see here in this verse, we should ask that question. So if we love God, we will obey. And we will ask this question, what am I supposed to be doing for Him? What does God have for me to do in my life right now? Interesting, also Philippians 2, he says, do all things without complaining. That's easy. We never complain. Do all things without complaining and disputing. Yes, that was tongue-in-cheek. That you may become blameless and harmless, children of God without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast the word of life, so that I may rejoice in the day of Christ that I have not run in vain or labored in vain. I offer this as a little snippet, as a sample of what Christ is doing in us, what He can do in us. Anybody else find it hard to overcome complaining and disputing, getting in arguments with people? I mean, come on. Mine is the only hand raised in here. I know that's not right. Come on, guys. It's hard. And it's easy until that one person does that thing that always triggers me. Right? I got some laughter over here. I don't know if he's laughing at me or with me, but okay, so these are the kinds of transformations that need to happen in our lives. These are samples of things that we can overcome through God working inside of us. If we allow Him to purify us by seeking after the types of things we're going to look at this morning, that we do in love for each other, then we can shine as lights. Then we will be different. Then people will look at us and say, wow, I know that's not normal. I wonder what's going on in that person's life. I wonder what's going on in his or her life. So Philippians 2:17, Paul now talks about what's going on in his life. He is being poured out as a drink offering. I think I used this recently. I guess I'm stuck on it a little bit right now. You ever feel like you're just pouring your life out for someone else? And maybe it feels like it's all give and no take, no receiving back. I mean, I've been there. Probably a lot of us have been there. What's Paul's feeling about that as he does that? He says, if I am being poured out as a drink offering on the sacrifice and service of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you. You're receiving the benefit of me pouring my life out for you. That just makes me happy. Maybe that's a difficult place to come to. And he did come to that at the end, near the end of his life. So that naturally brings us to Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Talk about pouring out. Yeah, living sacrifices. He doesn't want us to die. He wants us to live in service to Him. So if we do these kinds of things, and it's only a few minutes into the lesson, so this is not the final point. If we do these kinds of things, we'll be transformed. There we go. There's the rest of it. We will be transformed by bringing our minds into conformance with Jesus's, with what God wants us to bring, to think about and be like. And we will prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Have you ever tried to take that phrase apart and understand it more deeply? How do we prove what is good and acceptable to God? The idea with that prove is to test, and therefore, when the test is complete, you have test results, and so you can discern, you can understand then the results of the test. The effect is then that we will show God working inside of us. When I conform to being more like Jesus and then that changes who I am for the better. That is proving God's perfect and good and acceptable will in me. We're going to be able to live our best lives. We're going to live to our highest potential when we change these deep, self-centered impulses that we have, and we care more about loving others than ourselves. So the verses we've talked about so far really are a little generic, and they addressed loving God just as much as they address loving each other. Now we're going to focus on loving each other. Loving our neighbors, as Jesus puts it, as ourself. And he says, remember, there's no other commandment greater than these. How is this similar to the first command? What does it require? Those were the questions we presented at the beginning of the lesson. Go ahead and turn to Matthew 18 if you can. In Matthew 18, we have the parable of the unforgiving servant. Beginning in verse 23, we see that the kingdom of heaven is like. So, the whole point here, Jesus is telling us, this is what the kingdom is like. And as we are Christians who have that citizenship in the kingdom of heaven, this should be of interest to us. It's like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he was not able to pay, his master commanded that he be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and that payment be made. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him the debt. Oh, happy day, right? But that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. So to put this in a little bit of perspective, and I know some of you may be reading from a newer translation that helps us get that perspective. 10,000 talents is just unimaginable wealth. He's never going to pay that back. And 100 denarii is about 4 months' wages. That you can pay back, right? So he goes out, he finds some other fellow servant who owes an amount that it is possible for him to pay back, and he repeats this whole scenario. He says, pay me what you owe. And he says, the other servant says to him, have patience. Have patience with me. I'll pay it. I'll pay it. The exact plea that he made to his master. But he doesn't listen to his fellow servant. Instead, in verse 30, he would not, but went and threw him into prison till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what had been done, they were very grieved and came and told their master all that had been done. Then his master, after he called him, said, You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you begged me. Should you not also have had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you? And then he gives him punishment. What does that have to do with loving our neighbors as ourselves? Well, that servant wanted pity. He wanted forgiveness. He wanted the master to let go of what he owed him and freely pass over it. Just forget it. And then that same request was made of him, and he was unable to give it. Let me apply it in these ways, and I think it's the same mindset that's involved. Have you ever been upset or had someone upset with you, and then because of the friction there and because someone's upset with you, you turn around and the next person you meet, you're upset with them. We would prefer that person who is upset with us to make it right, come to terms, so we can be at peace with them and move on. And that's not what we give that next person that we run into. Instead, we're upset with them. Perhaps for no reason, or perhaps for far less provocation than would normally make us upset. Have you ever felt really guilty? And because the guilt is weighing on you so heavily, then that makes you upset with someone else. You're not willing to pass on that forgiveness that you so deeply crave. Have you ever felt unworthy? Just not worthy to be in a situation, not worthy of for whatever reason, and then you treat other people as less than yourself, lower than you. You treat them with a haughty attitude, don't have the time of day for them, whatever the case may be. And you allow yourself to do these things knowing you're going to hurt the other person because you've been treated wrongly. In the case of this servant in the parable, he was actually forgiven and still treated others in these ways. What does it take? What does it take to forgive others? To not be upset with others when perhaps they have wronged us? What does it take to forgive and let go? Especially when maybe the other person is treating us wrong. What does it take? There's a certain amount of sacrifice there, isn't there? Whatever piece of that is inside of us, we have to sacrifice to still offer love and care and concern for that other person when maybe we're not getting it ourselves from them. Let's look in Matthew 20. Here we have a vineyard owner, and he follows the custom of the day. He goes to the marketplace, and anyone who's standing around, he says, "Come on, I got work for you today. You can make some money today." And they come. And then he goes back later, and other people have showed up at market. He's like, "There are jobs available. There's work. You want work?" And they come. And so several times throughout the day, he gets a new wave of workers in his vineyard. And they're all working hard. And of course, the ones who were hired earlier, they have to work through the heat of the day. Very difficult to bear the heat of the day. There are some that he gets even just for the last 3 hours of the workday. And he ends up paying those last workers first. And as they come, they receive a full day's pay. This is awesome. Worked 3 hours, got paid for the whole day. I'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully at the beginning of the day. And those who did work from the beginning of the day, they came and they thought to themselves, he's going to give us more. If he gave them extra pay for not working the whole day, surely those of us who work the whole day will get more. And he didn't. He gave them a day's wage. They were upset with that. They're disappointed. The part of this that I want to read is here in verse 10 and a few verses following. Again, Matthew 20, beginning in verse 10. "But when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more, and they likewise received each a denarius. And when they had received it, they complained against the landowner, saying, 'These last men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us who have borne the burden in the heat of the day.' But he answered one of them and said, 'Friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give to this last man the same as to you.' He says, 'Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things?' But then he says, 'Or is your eye evil because I am good?' Is your heart poisoned by bitterness because someone did something good? I would love to say that this never affects me. I would love it if it never affected Christians, right? If we have pure hearts, and when we see someone receive something good, we're just happy for them. We're never envious or jealous or bitter because they got something maybe that I feel like I deserved. Or maybe I've been looking forward to this, I've been longing for this, and now my expectation has been disappointed. Again, there in verse 10, when the first came, they supposed they would receive more. They had set up certain expectations beyond what was agreed on, but they had those expectations. They were disappointed. And it hurt. But the master corrected them and said, no, you need to rejoice when others get what is good. Don't let your eye be evil. Don't let your heart have bitterness in it because I've blessed somebody else with something that you wished you had or expected, or life isn't what you thought it would be. It's awfully easy to become bitter when life is not what I thought it would be like. And that's the time to look up at the Master and see him as a good, loving, benevolent Master who's given me what I need and given others what they need in his wisdom. And he knows better than I do. There's a heart attitude we're going to have to change there to love those others. Parable of the lost coin, I've been treading on this a little bit with the last parable. In Luke 15, we have someone who really, really, really needs this coin that she has lost. Verse 8 of Luke 15. Or what woman having 10 silver coins, if she loses one, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? This is a big deal. She needs that other coin. She doesn't have much for her retirement. She's lost 10% of what she does have. It's a big deal. I know that because she gets out the light. When I look for something, more and more, I get out a light. That's what she does. She lights the lamp. She sweeps the house. She's combing every corner. So verse 9, then when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and saying, rejoice with me, for I have found that piece which I lost. Likewise, I say to you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. So, Jesus applies it here to a sinner that repents. We're going to apply it to some other things too, right? Someone who, to apply it as Jesus did, someone whose life is messy, whose life is different, whose life I'm just not comfortable with. And yet they're forgiven too. That makes them my brother, my sister. That makes us family. That means there are strong bonds that tie us together. And I need to get more comfortable and recognize that God's forgiven them too. Also, are we willing to be happy with someone else just because something exciting has happened? Maybe I'm down in the dumps. Maybe my luck has been terrible all week. And someone else comes along. My friend's like, you'll never guess what happened. I won $5,000 at the local store. You never win anything in those sweepstakes, and I won. Maybe am I tempted to say, shut up. You know what? I'm busy right now. We got to talk later. Or can I rise above my feelings and say, you know what? That's great. I'm so happy. That's awesome. Do you see how God is training us through what happens between me and my neighbor? And that when I love my neighbor as myself, character changes happen, heart changes happen, and I can go from being a caterpillar to a butterfly. I can have a transformation in my life and become a much better version of myself, the best version ever. God's working on us through our relationships. I want to run through some verses. We've looked at the story, and now we're going to see several principles I didn't want to leave out. It says in Romans 12, 9 and 10, let love be without hypocrisy. Don't just let it be something you talk about. Let it be something you do and feel. He also in verse 10 says, be kindly affectionate to one another. I often make the point that love, care, concern for my neighbor's best interest is not the same as having a feeling of affection, right? It's deeper, it's stronger, it's richer than that. However, Romans 12:10 says it should include that. I need my emotions to be part of this love as well. I need that kind, affectionate attitude toward the other person to really be part of how I feel about them. And he finishes up, in honor, giving preference to one another. Just make this your default. No, you go ahead. No, I would like for you to have that. The other person. Give preference to the other person. Romans 12:13, distributing to the needs of the saints. You know what you have to do before you distribute to needs? You have to notice them. You have to be observant. You have to look and see, what do my brothers and sisters need? And then make a plan to help meet that. And of course, given to hospitality. In verse 16, he says, be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. If we put all of these into one kind of idea, concept, we need to be trying to agree. No, it's not always going to happen. But in our relations with each other, we need to have the desire to agree. I remember one time as a kid, there were about 3 of us in this Bible class. And I said us, so I'm part of the guilty ones here. And we wanted to be good students, and we wanted to figure out the details of how to answer these questions exactly correctly. And so the teacher would ask a question, and one of us would answer, and then another one would raise his hand and say, oh, here's a better way to say that. Here's a clarification of that answer. And the third one raise his hand and say, oh, wait, I've thought of this other aspect, and I'm going to throw this in here too. And we each were like improving each other's answers. And finally the teacher said, stop it, guys. You're just, offering minor improvements on the theme. The theme's already been answered. So unless you have something really different to contribute, you're fine. I don't think we were being humble. I think we were being wise in our own opinions. Each one of us thought that the way we would say it would be just a little better. And the teacher didn't let that get out of hand, but I learned a huge lesson there. And it stuck with me. Be of the same mind toward one another. Seek to agree. Obviously, inside of Christ truth. In Genesis 13, Abraham and Lot have both gotten so much livestock that the land won't hold all of them, and their herdsmen are arguing with each other simply because of logistics. Having a hard time finding water and grass for all the animals. And so Abraham gets with Lot and he says, hey, let's stop this arguing. Let's stop this quarreling. Let there be no strife between you and me. We're brothers. You pick the part of the land you want to be in. I'll pick a different part. I want you to have first pick. And Lot chose the best of the land. He chose a well-watered area. It's a great example from Abraham. You pick what you want. I'll go the other way. We'll figure this out. We'll give honor to the other person. Jesus says the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, but whoever desires to be great among the disciples, let him become your servant. Whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. And then he says, just like the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, to the point that he would give his life to pay for yours. Let's love our neighbors as ourselves, just like Jesus did. Let's desire to serve each other. Philippians 2, before the place we read earlier, uses these phrases: having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. In lowliness of mind, esteem others better than himself. Don't look out just for your own interest, but also for the interest of others. 1 Peter chimes in: be of one mind, have compassion for one another, love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous, not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, blessing, knowing that you were called to this, that you may inherit a blessing. When somebody does something harsh, mean, wrong to me, my response needs to be to bless, to love, to be courteous, to be kind, so that I can inherit a blessing from God. I bless, God blesses with the inheritance. And so, when we look at this idea, love your neighbor as yourself, we ask, how is this similar to the first command? What does it require? Both of these commandments require and lead us through radical transformation in our lives, truly becoming more like Jesus as we encounter each situation that we have to deal with in life. It's important for us to make the world brighter for whoever we can. At some point, it will be a sacrifice to make the world brighter for someone else. We will have to help someone who has hurt us, or maybe just we are hurting and we have to reach out and help someone else. True love will make that sacrifice. That's what we want to reach for. If you selfishly refuse to give love to others, darkness and loneliness will fill your days. It will leave you empty, just as you have left others empty when you could have spread the light and made their day a little bit brighter. I think these are right conclusions from our passages we've read today. When you make the sacrifice, in the midst of pain, when you reach out and help someone else, even though really you need someone to help you, that will end up bringing you far more joy than if you had just sat around waiting to be filled by others. Because you will realize that you are fulfilling one of the purposes that God created you for. God has created us to give and to love. He does that. We're made in His image. He expects us to do like He does. And there is a reward in heaven one day for that as well. If you're here this morning and you need to make your life right with God, if you realize that you're lacking, that you, for whatever reason, need to repent publicly, or you would like for help and maybe some accountability in pursuing godliness in your life, we'd love to help you. Please come if you need to as we stand and sing.